welcome to Counterpoint. I'm Tanya Granick-Allen. We have our Current Issues panel with us today, a regular feature here on the show. And today we're covering many issues which you may have seen in the news headlines. We're going to discuss Alberta's new gas tax holiday, how Albertans will get some relief at the pumps. We're going to cover the drama surrounding the word woman at the confirmation hearings for Supreme Court nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson. We'll talk about how Canada has lifted COVID testing for vaxxed travelers as of April 1st, and the wonderful, fantastic news of Canada's men's soccer team qualifying for the World Cup. But the issue which caught my attention the most was Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's trip to the European Parliament and the response from some of the MEPs there. Lots to discuss, and returning now to help me unpack it all are political commentators Brock Stephenson and Yianni Macris. Brock, sorry for messing up your name there, but welcome, Brock, welcome, Yianni. Thanks for joining me today. So let's get right to it. Justin Trudeau, our Prime Minister, was recently in Europe. He addressed the European Parliament. Obviously, he was there to discuss what's going on with the war in Ukraine and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But some of the MEPs don't really think he had a right to be there. And I want to show you some clips. And they're fascinating. Some of the words were very bold. So let's just show those clips now, and you can see what I mean.
Then again, a prime minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
And with the Prime Minister of Canada, the way he's behaving right now, he's exactly like a tyrant, like a dictator. He's like Ceausescu in Romania. If even you doubt, if you raise doubts about the vaccines, you're outcasted. What's the difference between what he does and what happened under the Inquisition?
Nažalost, danas su među nama I oni koji gaze te temeljne vrijednosti. Kanada, nekada simbol modernog svijeta, je pod vodstvom vaše kvazi-liberalne čizme proteklih mjeseci postala simbol kršenja temeljnih ljudskih prava I građanskih sloboda. Gledali smo kako konjima gaze žene, kako samohranim roditeljima blokirate bankovne račune, da ne mogu platiti djeci školovanje, da ne mogu platiti lijekove, da ne mogu platiti račune za struju I vodu, da ne mogu platiti rate kredita za svoje domove. Za vas su to možda liberalne metode. Međutim, za mnoge građane svijeta to je diktatura najgore vrste.
Christian Andersen, the German MEP, and Mislav Kolakušić, who is the Croatian MEP, they were actually saying these words with Justin Trudeau physically in the room. Cristian Teres, the MEP from Romania, that was a speech he had given a few weeks prior, so just to be clear. Brock, let's start with you. I mean, I was shocked when I saw this video footage. Are you surprised that Europe has, I guess, taken notice of what's gone on in Canada the last few months?
The last couple of months in Canada have been an aberration in Canadian history. We're usually the quiet, do our part democracy, but the Emergencies Act being invoked over some opposition that escalated in Ottawa and got out of hand at some border crossings became a real issue. I think the MEPs from Germany and Croatia spoke their minds, something that you don't see on Canadian TV very much. There's a lot of frustration from the Europeans that see Justin Trudeau flying in to be the hero and having not much to offer in the Ukrainian crisis with the invasion from Russia. I think we've got to see Canada for what it is. Mélanie Joly, our foreign affairs minister, recently said we didn't have much to offer. And although her comments were criticized, she might have been to the point that Canada doesn't have much to offer on the world stage anymore. We've slipped a long way from World War II or Korea.
Okay, I want to continue this discussion. We've got to cut to commercial. But when we get back, we'll discuss, does Canada still offer something? Do we have a moral leg to stand on when it comes to civil rights? We'll be right back. Yianni, we saw that footage. Those members of European Parliament did not mince their words. Does Canada still have a moral leg to stand on when it comes to us, guiding and lecturing other countries on their civil liberties, their civil rights, human rights violations, when we've seen what happened last several months here in Canada?
Well, listen, first and foremost, it was embarrassing to see that happen at the European Parliament. You have MEPs who, had to live through communist dictatorships in their own country, whether it was the Romanian MEP under the Ceausescu regime or the Croatian MEP during communist Yugoslavia. It's really discouraging to see that people with actual lived experiences under dictatorships, under communism, are calling out our own prime minister, who lauds himself as a defender of freedoms and democracy in the West. So do we really have a moral leg to stand on? I don't think so.
My goodness. And what's sad to me is that the reason for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau being over in Europe was to add, I think, moral support to, I guess, the plight of Ukrainians who are suffering through war in their own borders with this Russian invasion. I think Canada is a member of NATO. The world used to at least look to Canada to kind of, lead the way and offer some support. Is NATO, is Europe still looking to Canada to lead that way when it comes to helping out Ukraine? Brock?
I think Canada's been an afterthought all the way through this process. We don't have much to offer to Ukraine. We can resettle some refugees, but we're not going to be of much value to the NATO military mission if it escalates to that point. Okay,
Yianni, do you concur?
I concur 100%.
Okay, well, we're going to move on. While this war has been ravaging Ukraine, while there's a battle going on there, we have seen gas prices just surge here in Canada. And Alberta is doing something to help their citizens. The Alberta government has decided they're going to take a fuel tax holiday. They're going to suspend the provincial sales tax or the provincial tax on fuel, making it a little bit easier for Albertans. And I know this has been happening south of the border. Various states have taken these measures. Yianni, is this a good move? I think it's universally a good move, but what do you make of this?
Well, I mean, it's no secret. I worked for the UCP throughout the COVID pandemic. And, one thing that was always at the top of the list with respect to what the members of the legislature would bring forward to the table was the rising costs of living, and the carbon tax being one of the biggest issues surrounding that. So the move isn't surprising, especially since Western Canada has obviously been hit hard by the carbon tax, in particular Alberta with its robust oil industry. But it's not even about partisanship at this point, I think. The Bank of Canada has stated the carbon tax hike that's going to happen is going to increase inflation by 0.5 percentage point. And that's on top of a 30-year high for inflation. So I think Premier Kenney's making the right move here. It'll make life more affordable for Albertans. And I mean, coming from Alberta, I can totally understand how that'll make a difference at the pump.
Okay, Brock, you have to chime in here. You're in British Columbia. They have the highest gas prices, petrol prices at the pumps for the nation, I believe. Would the BC Liberal, or the BC NDP-led government, do you think they would look into something like that?
The NDP refused. They are giving out a cash payment later this spring. They don't see it as a good move. They're seeing it as a way to allow the gas companies to hike their prices by taking the money that was going to the province and going to the gas companies instead. I think for Jason Kenney, this is a good win. He needs one. It's been a rough term as premier. Brian Jean's now back in the legislature and looking at his job. So I think he needs to have some positives. This is one for Albertans. It's been a rough go. Gas prices are up. The cost of living is up. The cost of groceries, everything's more expensive. And I think Jason Kenney realizes there's only one taxpayer, and good on him for that. He's got a tough road ahead, though. Well,
Yianni, I want to ask you, since you had a front row seat there to some of the policies of the UCP, the Alberta-led government. There's been a lot of fighting from Alberta for the carbon tax, and I would argue rightfully so. I'm not a proponent of the carbon taxation. Is this going to be kind of the new arrangement that, since they weren't able to succeed in court blocking that carbon taxation, that instead they'll just simply remove their provincial tax, let the carbon tax stand federally, they're mandated to, and this will be the solution? So this is their win against the carbon tax? We have 30 seconds.
Well, one thing that we have to point out is that this is only against two types of gas, the freezes that it's affecting. It's just regular gasoline and diesel, whereas Canada has 22 that the carbon tax falls under, particularly in Alberta. So I think this is a step in the right direction. I mean, it was a big blow when the Supreme Court ruled that the federal government has the right to impose a tax on provinces. But I think this is a step in the right direction.
Okay, great. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're continuing our discussion on a variety of current issues with Brock Stephenson and Yianni Macris, political commentators. So south of the border in the United States, they're in the middle of a Supreme Court of the U.S. confirmation hearings for Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. Well, a U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn, decided to ask her a very serious and a very shocking question. Take a look at this clip and you'll see what I mean.
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
Can I provide a definition?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah.
I can't.
You can't?
Not in this context.
So
I'm not a biologist.
The meaning of the word woman is so unclear and controversial that you can't give me a definition?
Okay, so I'm sure you both have seen this clip. It went like wildfire, went viral on social media. It's made its memes were so many crazy memes were created from this clip. But, you know, I queued up that clip by saying that it was a very controversial question. Well, in this day and age, it seems that is a controversial question. What do you make of this, Brock?
I'm not a biologist either, but I think Judge Brown Jackson gave a poor answer. She should have referenced that it was regarding a specific case. Instead, she's now part of the soundbite headline fundraising email ecosystem where she's just going to be beat on until the Democrat majority in the Senate approves her. I think she will be confirmed, but there's a reason the Supreme Court in the U.S. isn't televised. It's to keep the gotcha politics out of things. I think the Republican senator, she asked a question that was tough, but there's lots of tough questions that you're going to get asked as a Supreme Court justice, and her preparation wasn't optimal.
Yianni, was there a right answer to that question? I know I'm going to shock viewers by saying that, but it's such a politically charged climate. Like, is there a way that she could have answered that question without getting pummeled from the left or the right?
I mean, for sure. I'm not going to say what is a right answer and what isn't, but courts in the United States apply a rule of statutory interpretation, and that essentially calls for the words in the legislation or laws that they're looking at to be given ordinary meaning. That's how courts interpret and apply relative legislation. And now sometimes the words of that law or statute or whatever's before the judge may have a plain and straightforward meaning, so that the court takes that at face value. But in many cases, there's a lot of ambiguity in the words of the statute or of the legislation that have to be resolved by the judge and ultimately interpreted by the judge. Okay. So I think as a potential Supreme Court justice, you have to have the ability to do that. And whether you give an answer as to what is a right or wrong answer to that, I think is ultimately up to her, and she's going to be sitting on the bench.
Yes, I agree with you. I think she has the votes, and this is just a process that has to happen. You know, I think back to Justice Kavanaugh's hearing and Justice Coney Barrett's hearing, and you know, I don't seem to recall the confirmation hearings of many Supreme Court justices before that. But to me, they seem so politically charged now. You know, am I wrong, Brock? Has this always been the way? Or is this what we're coming to expect now as the lines in the sand become so much more clear and pronounced?
In the last decade or so, it's been the way, but prior to that, it was usually a widespread victory in the confirmation, with Judge Bork being the exception under Ronald Reagan. I think this is the way it's going to be going forward, though. Whichever party has the majority in the Senate will determine who is going to the Supreme Court. Now,
you know, and I don't even know who wants to take a stab at this, but does one's personal, like, you know, Ketanji Brown Jackson's personal opinion on this matter, will that actually weigh in on her Supreme Court decisions when she comes up with her decisions? Yianni, what can we expect? You
know what? As much as people like to say that judges are impartial, we're humans. We have our own biases. I've seen before, and I've read in various rulings of courts in Canada and the United States, or what have you, where you can clearly see that there's a personal bias that the judge holds. There are regional biases. You'll see in the southern states that there's a lot more leniency towards the Judeo-Christian viewpoint with respect to certain social matters, whereas in northern United States, you don't necessarily see that as much. So I think bias is definitely going to play a role, but that's not to say that it doesn't play a role in every single judge.
Yes, I guess it's human nature to have some kind of bias. I mean, that's how we form our opinions. But I suppose that expression, as you rightfully pointed out, is justice should be blind. Brock, will justice ever be blind? Was it ever blind?
I don't think it was. It probably won't be either.
Yeah, and as we continue on with this hearing, I'm sure, well, it's almost wrapping up though, but as we continue on, I think we'll see lots more division south of the border. It seems to be the way things are nowadays. Anyhow, we'll continue this discussion in just a few moments when we return. Welcome back. We're wrapping up our current issues panel, and joining me is Brock Stephenson and Yianni Macris. Gentlemen, you've been great contributors so far. We have more to talk about, and finally we're going to talk about something COVID-related. It's been a while. Canada has now decided that it will lift the mandatory testing requirement for travelers returning to Canada as of April 1st. Many jurisdictions in the world have already done so. Canada is finally joining in. But it's just for the vaxxed travelers, so only those who've received 2 doses of the vaccine. Yianni, I'll let you take a stab at this first. Is this the right move? Is this the right step in the right direction? What do you think?
It's very much welcome news, certainly probably by the majority, and it's long overdue, I think. It's a step in the right direction, but I don't think it goes far enough. I mean, unvaccinated Canadians are still not allowed to board a plane or a train in order to travel within their own country. And I think it's ridiculous, because if the unvaccinated can't fly from Toronto from Calgary, let's say, but they can certainly drive and go to all the same places the passengers on that plane are going to go to when they land in Toronto, it's just very hypocritical, and it's the hypocrisy that gets me, and I think it needs to stop.
Brock, what are your thoughts?
The federal government in Canada is trying to catch up with the rest of the world, most Canadian provinces, and start to relax some of the rules, at least for summertime. I'm sure this isn't the end of the rule changes, but it's great for the Canadian tourism sector. Many of our tourism businesses focus exclusively on foreign travelers, and with the damage done to our economy by coronavirus, it's a small step in the right direction.
Yes, Brock, you mentioned a good point that the tourism sector has been pummeled, especially for international travel. The airlines, I think many tourist operators were demanding that the government, and this is going back months ago, that they lifted the restrictions. I mean, masking is obviously still in. You know, it is just obviously in the low 90s percentage of Canadians are vaxxed. What about those unvaxxed? What about those who elected not to get this jab? They must be feeling horrible that they don't have these, they can't even leave, they can't even drive to America because you have to be double vaxxed to get into America. They're essentially stuck in Canada. How do you think, Brock, this is resonating with them?
I think that part of the Canadian population has been isolated. I think they're justifiably frustrated, and the people in power at the provincial and federal level should have looked at what they did and figured out a way to convince more people to take the vaccine. And instead, they vilify them, particularly Prime Minister Trudeau, as the Europeans like to point out.
Okay, or what if they didn't want to take the vaccine? And what if they don't want to be convinced to take the vaccine? I mean, you know, Yianni, you brought up a good point. You can board a flight one place, but you can also drive if you're doing international travel, or within your intra-national travel, rather. You know, the virus is not limited to just a plane. It can be transmitted anywhere, really. If you want to walk around or go into a store or get into a car and drive to another city, it can be transmitted that way. So why is the government not just dropping the requirement for testing for all Canadians altogether?
Well, it's simple. They need the downtown Toronto voters to agree with them. You know, I think on a much broader scale, the science says that transmissibility on aircraft is actually lower than sitting in a restaurant. I mean, wow. Aircraft these days have filters for the air circulation in the airplane at 35,000 feet that are hospital grade or better. So to sit here and think that you're more likely to get COVID on an airplane as opposed to sitting in a bus or at a restaurant, I think is greatly irresponsible, and it just contributes to this COVID farce that we have going on, where the science is always changing, but the narrative is always changing as well. So I think the government really needs to sit and look at how they want to perpetuate a specific narrative and stop changing it, or else they're going to lose the trust of Canadians. And I think they've already gone in that direction.
Well, I hope this, two-tier society, if you will come to an end soon, and then all Canadians can enjoy the same benefits and privileges of being here in the country, especially their right to mobility. That's huge. Okay, we only have 40 seconds left. I want to end on a high note. This is fantastic news. Canada's men's soccer team has qualified for the World Cup. I'm a big soccer fan, so this is huge. I always, this is great news. Anyways, Brock, you start us off. How exciting is this?
This is good. One day, Canadians will grow up knowing as Canadian soccer player, in addition to Christine Sinclair, our greatest national soccer players. Good on them.
Yianni,
hopefully, FIFA doesn't fleece us when we host.
Okay, Yianni, 10 seconds.
Coming from a Greek immigrant family, I've always been cheering for the Greeks, but as a second-generation Canadian, I'm proud to say I'm Canadian and to see the country that I was born in and raised in qualify for the World Cup.
Okay, well, I look forward to seeing those Canadian flags on your car when you're driving around town. Okay, that's all the time we have. Thank you both so much. Appreciate it. Well, lots of exciting and also some potentially depressing news that came out of the headlines this week, but we will stick to it. And as usual with our current issues panel, we'll unpack all those issues. For Counterpoint, I'm Tanya Granick-Allen.